She utterly hated Jim Morrison. That much was clear to anyone who knew her. While most of the world saw him as a charismatic rock legend, the frontman of the Doors with his hypnotic voice and poetic lyrics, she saw something entirely different, a symbol of personal pain and betrayal. Her name was Patricia Kenneally, a respected rock journalist and author. In the late 1960s, she interviewed Jim Morrison for Jazz and Pop magazine. What began as a professional interaction soon turned into a romantic relationship. Unlike Morrison's many casual affairs, Patricia believed theirs was more serious. In fact, in 1970, the two took part in a Celtic handfasting ceremony, which she considered a legitimate marriage, though it wasn't legally binding. While Morrison never publicly acknowledged her as his wife, Patricia held on to the belief that their bond was real and meaningful. However, Jim Morrison was never the kind of man to settle down. Deeply immersed in the hedonistic lifestyle of rock stardom, Morrison struggled with alcoholism, drug use, and a chaotic personal life. At the same time he was involved with Patricia, he remained in a long-term relationship with Pamela Corson, the woman he lived with in Los Angeles and who inherited his estate after his death. Morrison's refusal to choose between the two women was not only hurtful, but also humiliating to Patricia. She often spoke of how Morrison promised her honesty and love, only to break that trust repeatedly. After Morrison's death in Paris in 1971, Patricia's pain grew deeper. She was not informed about his death until after he was buried. She wasn't invited to the funeral, and her role in his life was mostly erased by those around him, especially by the media and Morrison's inner circle. Pamela Corson, who had a stormy and violent relationship with Morrison, was often portrayed as his only true love, while Patricia was pushed aside, written off as just another groupie, something she fiercely rejected. As years passed, Patricia made her own voice heard. In her books and interviews, she described Morrison as brilliant but deeply flawed. She spoke candidly about the emotional damage he inflicted on her, the manipulation, the drinking, and the emotional unavailability. She didn't hate him just because their relationship failed. She hated the way he treated her, the lies, and the emotional games. She hated how the world idolized him, never acknowledging the darker side of his personality that she experienced firsthand. Her bitterness wasn't only about the past, it was also about the legacy. While Jim Morrison was immortalized as a misunderstood genius, Patricia saw a man who refused to take responsibility for his actions. She saw a man who hurt people and walked away. That disconnect between the public image and the private reality fueled her anger for decades. To her, the myth of Jim Morrison came at the cost of the truth, and of her own dignity. She wasn't the only person close to Morrison who suffered, but her pain was unique. It was the pain of someone who loved deeply and believed in something that never fully existed. Over time, her hatred became less about revenge and more about reclaiming her own story. She didn't want Morrison to be remembered as just a rock god, she wanted the world to see the man behind the myth, brilliant, yes, but also selfish and destructive. Now, with more of her writings and interviews coming to light, people are beginning to understand her side of the story. The hatred she felt wasn't born from jealousy or resentment. It was born from betrayal, loss, and the loneliness of being erased from a narrative she lived. For Patricia Kenneally, hating Jim Morrison wasn't a choice, it was the only way to survive what he did to her.